Welcome back, everyone. Kevin Carpenter, CPP Events, and I'm with Kristen Shaker. She is going to be keynoting at cpponsea this year, cplusplus when I put in the domain name, I put cpponsea, and I was reminded that it is C++on-C. I need to get this right. So June 23rd to 25th, workshops are after June 26th to 27th. So make sure you come for the whole shindig. So Kristen, are you excited to come back to Folkestone?
I will be excited once I finish my talk and I'm no longer terrified.
So if you don't know Kristen, I'm chuckling. I got to move on from that for a second, and here's why. So she's an active member of the Boost Foundation board.
I'm the chair, actually.
Chair? Yeah,
I'm the
actually,
chair.
that's right.
For some ridiculous reason, I am the chair, yes.
So you gave a talk at CPPCon in 2023, and I seem to remember you're having this nervous energy like this too. And it was, how to build your first C++ automated refactoring tool. And I have to say, I use Clang Tidy a lot in my job, 4, 5, 6 times a day, not counting the CI/CD or Clang D. And so if you do anything with Clang Tidy, this talk was just awesome. You have to go Google it, pull it up on YouTube and watch this talk. So Kristen was equally as nervous about that talk, and it came out perfect. She just nailed it. So, I mean, come on, you're gonna nail this.
You know what? That's hopefully we'll hopefully have the same outcome. I always have a lot of nervous energy when I have a big presentation. So just gotta buckle down and get all the work done, and then I will be excited.
And that's understandable. But I mean, honestly, with all the women's events you lead, a co-founder of the New York C++ meetup group. I mean, oh my gosh, you just got a long list here, of everything that you do. So I am glad you will be giving the keynote From LeetCode to Leadership, Fixing Broken Engineering Interviews, which I love this topic. I'm excited to talk to you about this because, the company I work at, we don't do LeetCode interviews. Obviously, being in the C++ community and wanting to try to work at one of the FANGs or, some other finance companies, I've definitely experienced these interviews. And so, tell me, what do you think is so let's look at this first from a senior candidate. What do you think is one of the biggest disconnects that LeetCode does to a senior candidate interview?
Yeah, I think I might have changed the title of the talk since I submitted the abstract, but the ethos is similar. The idea is that there's a massive problem with the way that we conduct software engineering interviews, and I use that terminology almost ironically because the way that we conduct them almost has nothing to do with what software engineering actually is. And they're less interviews as they're not so much interviews as they are interrogations. So it's not only have they I'm sorry, I'm not as articulate as I want to be. So you're gonna edit this, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Or does it get edited? Does it not get edited? It's fine. Basically, we're not actually assessing the skill set that's necessary to perform effectively as a software engineer and perform the day-to-day duties of a software engineer. And what are interviews if not the means by which we assess a candidate's ability to perform at a specific job function?
Right.
And because of that, not only are we disenfranchising candidates, because obviously, as candidates, we're all frustrated with the interview process, but we are also the companies themselves are also disenfranchising themselves because there's not a direct mapping between performance in the software engineering interviews, the way that they are currently conducted, and job performance.
Right.
So the talk is really just a discussion of why we have these kind of bespoke programming problems as sort of a litmus test for any software engineer hoping to get a job, and what the problems with those are. And there also is a section in the talk about how we can improve, and sort of the structure by which we can actually use these interviews to be to like productively screen people for future jobs as software engineers. Does that make sense? I like didn't practice that, so
Well, that was the point of the interview, is to not have that practice. And then, if nothing else, we'll come up with more things to add to your talk.
that's
So
true.
it does absolutely make sense. I mean, so, to kind of relate, my experience was in one coding interview, I was asked to, write a spin lock or to write a mutex from scratch. And my answer of, why when I have stood mutex was not what they were looking for, oddly enough. But at the same time, then speaking with, we will say, managers of the people that gave me the interview questions, because I know them at conferences, it's like, well, yeah, they probably couldn't have wrote that either. It's not something you would actually do in the job. And so when I think of the leak code problems, at least in my experience, there's that disconnect. I do understand, in a couple of them that I've done, you get into a conversation, right? Where, I did have one with, I'll just call it out. I had one with Facebook that went really well because it was more of the conversation of, okay, well, why are you thinking this? And, making sure that I was asking the questions and making sure that I could clearly communicate. And although I didn't have the most effective algorithm, even in my feedback that I got back, it was very clear that
Oh,
I
I
could
lost you.
communicate the issues and ask the right questions and things like that. Which on that end, I think if you're using a problem to have that kind of discussion, then that might be all right. But I've seen plenty of cases where people are like, it's the luck of the draw, depending on the interviewer, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, right? Like one of the issues with the way that we have these problems set up right now is that our expectations for a candidate's response are no longer realistic.
Hmm.
Because there are such large interview banks and like such predefined rubrics, and I know this because I did interview at Google. Like I conducted
Yep.
interviews on the other end.
Right.
And like the analysis of what made a good or a solid or an okay candidate, like I thought those expectations were so out of line with what I would realistically expect somebody who had never seen this problem before to be able to like do in a 45-minute window.
Right.
And I think that's also one of the big issues, right? Like when we were doing these, using these questions as just kind of a way to like genuinely assess a candidate's ability to problem solve, that was all right. But now, because like so much preparation is expected, and because the rubrics have gotten, I don't even want to say rigorous, I want to say unrealistic. Like genuine attempts at problem solving now seem roundabout and ineffectual, right?
Hmm.
It's like, can you recite the answer to this problem like quickly in a way
Yeah.
that like also gives us time to discuss the, time efficiency trade-offs and potentially even come up with a second algorithm.
Hmm.
And I just like, I think we've kind of gotten to a point where we're no longer using the questions in the way that they were intended. And so we really do
Right.
need to pivot, especially with like the advent of AI
Yes.
and AI's ability to like kind of answer these questions very quickly. Like we really do need to come up with a better way to assess a candidate's ability to perform in their job role. Um, and even if these like sort of programming problems, which by the way, I will say like competitive programming like is a skill and it's an impressive skill,
Right.
right? And it probably does help you perform like in a programming job, but it is by no means the only skill or like the only trait that you need to like have as a software engineer, right? So
Right.
the talk kind of breaks down like, even it talks about even if these programming problems were sufficient or like were good, sorry, even if these programming problems were good mappings onto
Hmm.
like um, effective software engineers, it also like we also will discuss sort of the huge gaps that leaves in terms
Yeah.
of like, we're not assessing a candidate's ability to actually like deliver on like large scale projects over like
Right.
long time horizons. We're not assessing a candidate's ability to generate maintainable and extensible code.
Yep.
We're not looking at them as like holistic engineers. And like, I think that's a real detriment to the company that is hiring the programmer and the software engineer, as well as the software engineer themselves.
Yeah, and it's so the company, EPX, where I'm at, when we hire, we are more likely to ask a candidate, a question about a project that they've worked on, and then we will deep dive and keep asking questions into what they've already done.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, and I feel confident in what we're doing, because for the last 8 years, I've only had 2 developers, out of our team move on to something like, so we seem to be doing good with the developers that we have. But for us, it's, you have that base knowledge. Did you understand what you were doing before? Because then it also comes down to, can you learn what we're doing? Are you interested in that? What pieces can you bring to that and grow with? Which I will say, if I separate out some of the interviews I've done before where you're looking at specifically the LeetCode problem, that's one thing. But at least in some of the interviews, they were um, they were iterative. Like, there was the LeetCode portion where you might have been working on the technical aspect, but then you also had a design, interview, or a systems interview where you had questions that were more along those lines. And I think, they ascertain the depth of who you are or what you're doing that way. But I just find it interesting because I think we do the same thing at North and EPX, just without throwing a shared problem on a whiteboard to start with. And so that said, I'm really looking forward to hearing how you wrap it all together on your talk. And to be clear, you're not getting everybody here's the 10 things that are going to get you past the LeetCode interview. This is more
No,
about
it's
what we can
not
do to make
that.
it better.
No, it's not that. And I also think, like, I think it's really admirable that you're willing to like talk about your past interview experiences, because I think one of the sort of like formative moments for me was when I started sharing my experience with interviews, and
Mm-hmm.
invariably the person that I was talking to would say like, "Oh, I also failed that interview," and I was like, "Well, we didn't
Yeah.
talk about it. Like, we never talked about it." Because it's kind of like a shameful thing, right? You
Yep.
feel like you are somehow less than because you didn't get an offer from this company, you didn't make it past this round of interviews. And so I'm actually like, it was really, really hard for me to discuss this topic. And I'm like privileged on some level because I was a staff software engineer at Google.
Right.
And so like it gave me a sense of security in my position and my competency,
Mm-hmm.
that I could say like, no, wait a minute, this isn't me. This is a problem that we all have. And like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm a competent engineer and I have like the performance reviews and promotions to back that
Yep.
up. But like,
Yep.
had I not gotten to that position, I don't think I would feel comfortable giving this discussion. Um,
You're absolutely right, because that's where I'm like, I just got promoted again this year, so I must be doing something right, even though I did not pass this one
yeah, and
particular portion of an interview.
I think it's really hard for people because they feel like it's a fault of theirs.
Yeah.
And it took me a really long time to also feel comfortable in my competency as an engineer. Because like, yeah, 3 or 4 years ago, if you had asked me this question, I would have just said I'm bad at technical interviews.
Yep.
Um, but I don't say that now, right? I think that like I have a skill set that is not
Mm-hmm.
captured by the way that companies currently conduct their technical interview process.
Right.
That's kind of how I communicate it now.
Yeah.
So I acknowledge that again, it's a privileged position. It's also a little risky because like I do realize that a lot of people will probably just like have the gut reaction like, oh, she is bad at interviews, or like she's not a good engineer. And I am taking that risk because this really bothers me, and it's bothered me for so long that I felt I had a moral obligation to talk about it when I was given the opportunity to give a keynote. I was like, oh,
Yes.
it'd be a real abdication of responsibility to not give this talk.
No, I think I'm super excited because, thinking of all the talks that I've seen from all the conferences, yeah, I'm super excited you're giving this at C++ on C. Like, I think it'll be a great talk by a great speaker.
Hopefully. I hope all these things.
I'm sure it will be beautiful. So I
Thank you.
appreciate your time today, Kristen. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to seeing you in Folkestone.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm excited. It's a great venue.
Yeah, it really is. And then it's the, coming from Arizona, it's like the perfect time to not be here in the desert because it'll just be beautiful weather,
Mm,
looking out over the channel. Um, and so, yeah, I will see you in Folkestone towards the end of June, June 25th.
yay! Yeah. And everybody that's watching, I'll see you there too, right? All
Yes,
of you?
yes. If you
Yeah,
haven't bought your tickets yet, you should. Thanks for your time today, Kristen. I appreciate it.
of course.
Bye.